just amazing how God works. And again, if this is your first time here, we're so glad you're here. I do hope that you'll fill that card out and turn it into guest services. And I pray that if you have a prayer request of any kind, just flip it over and turn that in. Those prayer requests are really prayed for. I mean, our prayer team, which reminds me they're not meeting tonight, but our prayer team takes those prayer requests seriously. They put them up on a wall and they pray for those things until that need is met, until you get an answer for it. So please do that, knowing that people are praying for you. And honestly, I struggled, and I love the way God works, man. I love the way God works, because when we were singing that song and the part about that we're surrounded by the arms of the Father, and when you think about that for a minute, we're surrounded by the arms of the Father. And I got this picture in my head of God just putting his arms around this whole place. And I almost came up on stage and said, we need to sing that bridge again. And then Caleb said, I think we need to sing that bridge again. You know, it's just like God is so amazing how he does that. So cool. Well, I want to continue in our series today, having leftovers. If you weren't here last week, we started this series, and we're not talking about the kind of leftovers you see in your refrigerator that hopefully you eat all that, and or maybe you forget about it. We're not, and then it ends up being a living, growing organism on its own. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And I'm hoping that you don't. We're not thinking about those kind of leftovers, but we're talking about having leftovers in our life. See, it's okay, and I don't know if you're one of these kind of people that's really, really organized and cleaned, and everything has to have a label, and everything's got to have its place, and if anything gets out of its place, maybe on your shop, in your garage or something, all your tools have an outline of it, you know, the tool that goes there, and so it's got to be perfectly hung up in that spot. Now, some of you know what I'm talking about. Or maybe you just throw stuff in the corner, but you know what kind of person you are, right? If you have to move stuff out of your back seat so people can ride with you in your car, right? Or possibly your basement is just so cluttered that you kind of can't walk through it, and you just kind of got to make a path to kind of get right. Some of you can't stand that, and you're like, I can't even live that way. I have to clean up my space before I even start working on something. And you know what kind of person you are. But it's okay that your attic may be cluttered. It's okay that your basement or your car may be cluttered. But it's not good for your life to be cluttered. And we all have a tendency, whether you're a Christian or not, really has nothing to do with it. It's not necessarily a spiritual issue. It's just a personal issue, right? That we don't need our lives to be so full of things that we're just running 100 miles an hour everywhere we're going. Our kids are doing 1,000 things and not really enjoying all of it. We're just busy, busy, busy. And we talked about it last week, and we're going to talk about this today, specifically time. And here's how you know if you've got a problem with no leftover time. You say things like, I'm going to be a little bit late, or I got to leave a little bit early. I might be a little bit late, might have to leave about 10 minutes early. Now, when is it exactly that we have to be there? Because I want to time it out just right to where I leave at the exact moment, not too soon, not too late, and I got to get there right at the right time. And if anything messes that up, right, then I'm late. But I want to time it out just right. And I'm not going to ask you to confess. I'm going to be the first one to confess. That's me. That's me. I don't like to be there too early, but I don't want to be late. I hate being late, but I don't want to be too early either. So I time it out just right. I'm like, okay, Google Maps says 19 minutes. It's 19 till, let's go. And if anything happens, if the traffic changes in those 19 minutes, I'm in trouble. And we know, right, we know the thought, we know the feelings when you get stuck in traffic and you're like, I had it planned perfect. And now this slowdown, somebody ran off the road or had a flat tire, and now traffic's backed up. And you feel that tension just welling up inside as the time clicks away and you go, I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to make it. And the tension rises, right? Some of you know what I'm talking about. Or maybe you hear this from your kids. Dad, you're always on the phone. Mom, you're always on the computer. Or maybe it's Dad, you're always on the computer. Mom, you're always on the phone. All you guys ever argue about is money. All you ever fight about is money. And I feel like we're going 100 miles an hour. We're doing all these different things, but I'm not enjoying any of it, right? I mean, that's just kind of, we cram our schedule so full that there's no time left over. There's no money left over, possibly at the end of the month. Maybe you've crammed your budget so full of every dollar that there's no leftover dollars at the end of the month. And we really struggle. Donna and I struggle with that a lot. And I'm going to talk about that next week, so you don't want to miss that. And I'm not asking for any of your money. I want to help you and help us to where we get paid once a month, and we have to really watch our dollars at the end of the month. If we're not careful, there's nothing left. And there needs to be some leftovers. There needs to be some leftover money. There needs to be some leftover time. Because if there's not, or if there's a bump in the road, there's a bill that you didn't expect, what happens is the relationship takes a hit. And suddenly you have problems in the relationship, and the most important thing is the relationship. And so that's really what we want to talk about. You know, having leftovers means that you don't have to drive 80 miles an hour to get everywhere. Having leftovers mean that you can actually, you know, come to church and listen without worrying. Or you can go to small group, or you can pray and focus and not lose track because you're worried about so many different things or what you got to do. Having leftovers just makes life so much less stressful. And we're all in that same boat. Like I said, this is not necessarily a Christian thing. It's just a thing. It's just the way it is. And we could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about time management. Those things are good if you find a good time management, you know, program or something. Or we could talk about calendars, you know, putting things on a calendar. Those things are good, and that's helpful, and maybe that works for you. But for most of us, those things don't work unless we're geared to that particular system. But I want to share with you today some wisdom from a guy that we all know really well, Moses. And this one principle, when we get to it, this one principle, I think outside of calendars and budgets and time management systems, all these other things, I think it's going to really change our lives. And I know that sounds like preacher talk, but I'm telling you, it's amazing how God gives us relevant truth that lasts forever. But the big issue throughout this whole series, and if you weren't here last week, you can go online and watch it, or if you get our app, we have a mobile phone app, you can watch it on your phone even. The big takeaway from this is that I think our biggest issue is that we have fear. We have fear. We have fear that if things don't work out the way we make them work out, it's not going to happen. And the Bible, the entire Word of God is full of this relationship, this discussion between God and man. And God is always trying to tell us, trust me, trust me, trust me. You can trust me with your finances. You can trust me with your time. You can trust me with your relationships. And we talked about last week, the one of the biggest ones that made the top 10 in God's list is taking a Sabbath. Just taking a day of rest, and whatever day that may be. And that doesn't mean, you know, you just do nothing necessarily, but it means it's a day that you rest and focus on God. And we use Sunday as our Sabbath, and I know we can go back and talk about what it really should be, but that in the old days, in those days, that the Israelites, God said, I want you to take a Sabbath. I want you to take 24 hours. And in this 24 hours, you don't work. It's against the law to work. And we go, well, wow, that's great. I get 2 days. I get 48 hours. I get 3 days. And sometimes I can take an extra day or half a day every now and then. So 1 day, that's nothing to me. But this is not where you just go home and do all your honey-do list, right? Or the things that you didn't do during the week. It's a day that you truly rest and let your body replenish. But the biggest issue is to trust God, is that we can trust God in the gaps. That if we don't do it all, God says, you can trust me to fill in the gaps. So today I want to talk about time, and we're going to get this wisdom from Moses, and I want to give you a little bit of background. I know you know probably all know about Moses, but when you think about Moses' life, he had a very interesting life. Moses' life went from one period to another period to another period to another period. Moses was born in the house of the Pharaoh. You guys know that, the Egyptian Pharaoh. He was actually kind of not born in the house, but he transferred to the house. You guys know the story, and if you don't, you can go back and read it. Moses lived in the best of the best. I mean, flat screen TVs in every room, limos, the blacked out Escalade, taking him to school. It was awesome. I mean, he had it all. And then he messed up, murders a guy, and has to run away. And then he spends 40 years shepherding sheep. Now, I don't know if you know much about shepherding sheep. I don't know if you've ever done it. Maybe somebody in here has had sheep. But that's what he was, a shepherd. He just spent every day taking all the sheep out to the field, watch the sun go across the horizon. When it gets dark, take them back in, put them in the pen. Next day, take them back out, sit there, watch the sheep, 40 years. Moses is like, this is it. This is as good as it's going to... 40 years shepherding sheep. And then suddenly Moses is the man. Moses gets called by God to go back to Egypt, and you know the whole story. Let my people go, right? And suddenly he's somebody, but he's like, I don't know why you send me. I can't speak well. They're not going to listen to me. But then he goes and he all the plagues and all, you know the story, right? Or you've seen the movie possibly. The story's better than the movie, actually more accurate. But I'm just saying you probably know that story. And then he goes and takes this new nation that God calls out of slavery, and he's walking around with them as their leader, all these grumbling, complaining people. You didn't give us good enough food. We should have gone back. Now all we got is bread. All we got is meat. We don't have any water, blah, 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 blah. Grumbling, complaining. 40 years. Walking around with grumbling, complaining people. And then to top it all off, at the end of his life, God's saying, I'm sending you to the promised land, but you kind of messed up and you hit a rock instead of talking to it, and you can go up and you can see it, but you can't go in. I mean, Moses is like, are you serious? I mean, my life is great. Then I'm a shepherd watching sheep. Then I'm, Mr. Somebody, setting my people free. And then I'm walking around with these grumbling, complaining people, and I don't even get to go in. And God says, no, you don't get to go in. You think your life is tough, right? Talk to Moses. But this wisdom we're going to get is from Psalm 90. Now, most of the Psalms we know are written by David, but this is a psalm written by Moses. It's great insight. Moses has some perspective that none of us really have on time. From his experience, 120 years and different things that he's done in his life. Moses said, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, which is, I think, a cool statement, or you brought forth the whole world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. In other words, Moses is saying, there's no beginning, there's no end for you, God. You're from everlasting to everlasting. You are God. Before anything ever was, you were. When everything else is gone, you're still going to be here. You're from everlasting to everlasting, and somewhere in between of that everlasting to everlasting is me, Moses, and is you and me today. Then he says, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. What a great statement. That should be in a movie somewhere, shouldn't it? Return to dust, you mortals. And all of us, no matter what your beliefs are spiritually, or whether you're a Christian or you believe in a different kind of God or no God whatsoever, doesn't really matter. All of us have this sense that God is in charge of the number of our days, right? We all feel like in some way, I can't explain it. Does God know when we're going to die? I don't know. Does God plan when we're going to die? I'm not sure. Does God work it out to the exact? I'm not sure how that works. But all of us have this sense that God is responsible or knows the number of our days, right? And I can prove it to you. If you found out tomorrow that you had a terminal disease, would you pray? If you found out tomorrow that somebody you love has a terminal disease, would you pray? And yeah, of course you would, because all of us have this sense, whether we can explain it or not, that God is in charge of the numbers of our days, or the length of our lives. And so he says, return to dust, you mortals. And then he says, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. So Moses says, in your perspective, God, 1,000 years is like a day, or it's like a watch in the night. Now, a watch in the night was like 3 hours. And, it's like when we say, my, how time flies. It's amazing how time flies. We were talking about this yesterday. How many years it's been since this happened or that happened. Man, how time flies. Moses is saying, how we say that to you, God? Time must really fly. I mean, it must be like our lives, our little lives that we get so jacked up about to you, God, must be like just a few hours. He goes on to say, you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like the new grass in the morning of the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but in the evening it's dry and withered. Moses has got this perspective. God, like to you, our lives are like grass that is just, you see it in the morning, and then in the afternoon the sun comes out and it's gone. That our lives are just like nothing. And we just can't have that perspective. I get it, but this is really what Moses is trying to get us to understand, that we don't need to worry so much about it. And he talks about how many days we may have. He says our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Now, I know all of you, I think even in this church we've sung that song, but how many of you can remember growing up singing I'll Fly Away in a church or a camp somewhere, right? That's where that song came from. You didn't know you were singing the scripture. That's where it came from, that we just fly away, that our days are maybe 70, 80. I looked it up this week. The average age in America, life expectancy is 79 years. That's pretty good. I also looked up in other countries what the average life expectancy was. There was a country that I've never even heard of, and their life expectancy was 44 years. So we're pretty blessed to live in the United States. We have a very, very high life expectancy. But again, we don't know. That's an average. Maybe we've had teenagers in our community that died this year. You know people that have had babies that died. You just don't know. The point is that God knows, but we don't know. But eventually our lives are going to pass away, and they're just so short. It's just such a short time, and we know that. He goes on to say, if only we knew the power of your anger. This is where it's kind of hard to deal with. Your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. This is a really hard sentence to understand. But I think what Moses is trying to say to us is, if we could see God as he really is, that we would give him the reverence that he's due. If we could somehow see God how he really truly is, that we would give him the reverence that he's due. And for all of us, I know that may mean a different thing, but that's why we come on Sunday. And I think for most of you, that's why you come. Maybe you came because somebody invited you or promised you lunch, and that's good. Or you'd meet somebody cute, and that's possible. I mean, I don't know what the reason is, but for most of us, we understand that God is so different from us and that we should worship him. But I'll be honest with you, none of us worship God in the way that he's due. None of us, even me included, none of us give God the reverence that he's due. I mean, he is God. When you think about this, that God spoke, and whether you believe the Bible or not, we all have that sense inside of us that there's something more to this life. But God, the creator of everything there is, spoke life into existence. With his words, he created. And he created the heavens and the earth, and he created light and dark, and he created everything. And then he took his hands, and we don't know how we kind of picture this from a man's point of view, but he took his own hands, and from the dirt of the earth he made man, which is where we all come from. And we all come from one man, which is pretty cool, I think. And this God is so unlike us. He's so unlike anything else. And Moses is saying, if we could just possibly get a glimpse, if we could somehow in our inside see God like he really is, man, we would reverence him so much differently. We would worship him differently. We would live our lives differently, wouldn't we? If we could really see God like he is. We would spend our money differently, wouldn't we? We would spend our time differently, which is really what the point is today. I think Moses would say, if you could see God the way he really is, we would be much more careful with our time. We would be a lot more careful with the things that we put in our calendar or the things that we take out of our calendar. And I think that's true in all aspects of life, but especially in time. And then he makes this statement that I think is the one that we have to camp out on today and really let this sink in. If you haven't heard anything else, I want you to hear this. He says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Moses said, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. See, we spend our time like we're going to live forever, don't we? We don't think about that. We know we're not. I mean, we were in here yesterday. For those of you who don't know, we had a memorial service for David Pearden yesterday in here, and it was a beautiful, wonderful time, and a lot of good, funny stories were told about David, and it was a celebration. But the fact is, we live our lives like we're just going to live forever, right? We do. We just think, that's not going to happen to me. Okay, Mark, you already told us 79 years. I got a long way, or I got not as many years. Maybe I got a couple of years, or maybe I got 10 years, or maybe I got 20 years, or 40 or 50 or whatever. But we don't know. We live like we're going to live forever. But the scripture says, and Moses says, if we could see God like he really is, we would be careful with our days. We would live like our days are numbered, and we would gain a heart of wisdom. If we would live like our days are numbered or limited, if we don't live like our days are limited, then we're going to end up at the end of our lives with some regrets that are completely avoidable. We're going to end up at the end of our lives saying, I wish I had done this more. I wish I had not done that as much. I wish I had done this more. I wish I had not done that. I wish I had spent more time here and less time here. I wish I had done this more and this less. And listen, maybe you're not in that position right now, or you don't feel like that's an issue for you. And especially if you're younger guys, I know a lot of times you don't have that issue with scheduling and your calendars and time and that kind of thing. But I'm telling you, if you can get this in your head now, if you can start doing like Moses said, to number your days, that God would give you a heart of wisdom, you will avoid a lot of the heartaches that many of us older guys have. And I'm telling the truth? Yeah, a few of you think so. But I don't want to end up at the end of my life saying, I wish I hadn't worked so much. I wish I hadn't spent so much time at work. All right? I know I got to work. I got to make a living. I got to provide for my family. But, man, at the end of it, I wish I hadn't spent so much time at work. I wish I had spent more time with my kids when they were little. I wish I had done more stuff with them. I wish I had spent more time with my husband or my wife. I wish we'd gone on more walks together, you know, and I wish we'd have turned the TV off more and just talked. I wish I'd have read more books, you know. I wish we'd have done things like that instead of working. And those are regrets that are avoidable. I know there's a pushback. I know you feel like, well, I can't change that, Mark. I don't have a choice. And I'm telling you, we do. If there's anything I learned from David Pearden, and I heard it said over and over again, it was David would tell people, don't worry. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. And I think, man, what a perspective that God is trying to share with us too. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. You can trust me. I will provide for you. If you'll honor me and seek me, I'll take care of every other thing in your life. But you just got to trust me, and you got to live the way I want you to live in relationship with me and with others. You just got to trust me. And listen, God can be trusted. And wherever you are in the spiritual thing right now, I just want you to know, God can be trusted. And it may be that you prayed to him when you were a child and it felt like he didn't answer your prayer. You prayed that somebody wouldn't die and they died anyway. You prayed that something wouldn't happen and it happened anyway. And you felt like God let you down, that God didn't fulfill your promise, his promise. He didn't answer your prayer. But I'm telling you, God has never, ever failed on a promise, ever. It may not have been the answer that we wanted, but God knows what's best for us. Just like a loving father. I mean, how many of you fathers, and some of you maybe can't relate to this, but when I was a kid, we had ice cream trucks in our neighborhood. Anybody live in a neighborhood where you had ice cream truck? Good. Many of you. And remember when you first heard that bell? Anybody remember that sound? Wasn't that just the most glorious sound in the summer? The ice cream truck. It's on the other road back there. And what did you do? You ran home, man, as fast as if you were out, and we were always out in the yard. I mean, not a lot of times kids are not out in the yard, but we were always outside, and you ran. I need a dime. I need a dime, right? A dime. You guys are going, a dime would buy ice cream? Yeah. Back in the day, a dime would buy an ice cream, right? Anybody remember that? I want to see who's really old. Yeah, a dime would buy an ice cream. It's probably, what, $1.50 now, right? Or $2 or something. And maybe a quarter and you'd get like something really special. And man, then that truck's coming down the road and you're running and just before you run out in front of the truck, your dad grabs you. But Dad, I want an ice cream. Why are you keeping me from getting an ice cream? We can't perceive that what Dad is doing is keeping us from getting run over by the ice cream truck. We think he's trying to keep us from something really good, but what Dad's trying to do is save our life so we can have something better. And that's what God does. And he's never failed on a promise to us. So what do you do with that in regards to your schedule? What do you do with that in regards to your time? And if you're a follower of God, if you're a follower of Jesus, God has some specific things for you, and you've got to be true to that. But I want to say this to you, and then I want to give you some homework, and we're going to close. Don't trade temporary things for eternal or more important things. Don't trade something temporary now for something that's more important later or an eternal issue. Don't trade your peace for progress. Don't trade your peace for prosperity. Don't trade something eternal or a more important relationship for something temporary now that's going to pass away anyway. So in your seats, there should be a little piece of paper, and some of you may have just kind of put it aside. There's a little piece of paper for everybody here. And I want everybody to take one. And even if you think, I'm not going to do this, this is stupid, I'm not doing it, take it anyway. Stick it in your pocket, put it in your wallet, put it in your purse, whatever. Just take it and stick it in your pocket. You can do it some other time. But this is your homework. And I know you didn't want to come to church and get homework. But these are 4 things that you need to do and you need to discuss. What do I need to add to my schedule? What do I need to add to my schedule? And some of you already know what that is, don't you? I need to spend more time with this person. I need to spend more time with that person. What do you need to add to your schedule? And the next thing is, what do I need to subtract from my schedule? Now, this is a harder one. This is a harder one. Because when we look at our schedule, we go, there's nothing I can take out. There's nothing. Everything I do is necessary and urgent and important. There's nothing that I can take out. But here's the thought. It may be that you need to put a name at the end of that question. It may be that there's somebody in your life that, not an evil person, not a bad person. We're not saying that. They may be, a follower of God. They may be good people, but they're just draining your life. And in this season of your life, somebody's got to go. Third one is, what do I need to do more? What do I need to do more? What do I need to do more of? I need to spend more time resting, relaxing, maybe playing golf, maybe fishing. Maybe, I don't know. Whatever it is. What do I need to do more? And then last thing is, what do I need to do less? Now, this could be anything. It could be a hobby. It could be golf or hunting. It could be work. But Mark, if I don't work enough, I'm afraid I won't make it. What's it? And I want you to get to the end of your life and say, I worked so hard, I made lots of money, I bought lots of stuff, I provided for my family, but I didn't know my kids. I didn't have the intimacy with my spouse that I really would have liked to have. And listen, you don't want to get to the end and have an avoidable regret. So maybe it's a hobby. Maybe you need to turn the TV off. Maybe you don't need to sell all the TVs in your house, but maybe just one night a week you need to decide, we're not going to watch TV. We're going to have a family night. We're going to spend time together. We're actually going to sit down at a table and eat together and have a conversation. It's like crazy, right? I know we're all in the same boat. Me too. Trust me. This is a conversation we have. I'm not immune to it. I just get to stand up here and tell you like I know what I'm talking about. But here's the thing. I want you to take that card home, and I want you to talk about it. I want you to be willing to have a hard conversation and answer these questions. And if you're in a group, if you're in a small group, listen, you don't need a curriculum. You just need this card. You just need to show up at group and say, all right, a little accountability. I need to do more of this. I need to do less of that. I need to cut this out. I need to add this to my full schedule that I can't add. So that means something's got to come out so I can add this. What is that for you? And I don't want you to miss next week. Next week, we're going to talk about money. I'm not asking you for money. I want to help you learn and us learn how to handle money. But we're going to have a special announcement that you're not going to want to miss next week in that message that we want to help. But listen, if we will begin to live our days like they are limited or numbered, we will develop, God will give us a heart of wisdom. And you want that. I know that about you. You want that. I ask you to stand. I want to pray for you, and then I'm going to let you go home. But God, I pray right now in this moment that you would speak to us in such a way that as we look over these cards, as we begin to have the discussions and answer these questions, God, we believe that your word is true. That if we begin to live our days, our lives, like they're limited, like they're numbered, God, you will promise, you have promised and you will do it. You will give us a heart of wisdom. So, Father, I pray that you give us the courage to take what we've heard today from your word, apply it to our lives, and begin to live our lives as our days are limited and numbered. Father, I pray that even today, that we can start, even looking in the next little bit of our day today, that we would not trade temporary things for the more important things, that we would not trade peace for progress or prosperity. But God, that we would learn to trust you because you can be trusted. And Father, that we would live our lives as our days are numbered and that you would give us a heart of wisdom. Father, I pray for these people that even in the time when they would say, I just don't see how I can do that, God, you would show them how they can change their schedules, what they should do and what they shouldn't do. I pray that for all of us. God, that we would put you first and learn to trust you with all that we have, especially our time. Give us the courage to do this, even today and throughout this week, in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Amen. God bless you guys. Listen, go have a great day. And